I should probably give out Dramamine for whoever who needs it. Along, and where are we? Boom, boom, and boom. Nope, I just did something wrong. Hold on a second. Give me one more moment.
I recognize those birds from the Hula Valley.
That's correct. We have some unfinished business. Okay, and now I do a boom and we're ready to go. Off we go. All right, so it's a pleasure being with everybody again. We have some, I know we're in Haifa right now, but we have some unfinished business that I just wanted to do very quickly before we actually get on the bus and start rolling off. And some of what I'm going to talk about, it's fun because you see after 3 days on the bus, we're on our 4th day on the bus, you could come to different locations in Israel and also mention different periods of time. And it reminds you of other places that you have been already. You start feeling a little more comfortable in the land based upon the knowledge that has been gained. So I just wanted to mention, I wanted to go back to where we were yesterday. Right, that is correct, Kim, you got it. That's the Hula Valley, and those are birds. And right up on top over here, the only place that you're going to have white-capped mountains is going to be the Hermon mountain range, the Hermon mountain. That's right, here's the Golan Heights, Hermon. And why do I want to go over there? Because I want to just talk about something that's very special to all of us, and that is the wine that's coming out of the Golan Heights. Just have to mention it once we're up here, and in different places in Israel, very quickly. Again, remember our Hula Valley, it's the bathtub that we have that's between the Golan Heights over here on the eastern border of Israel, and we're standing out on the hills of Naphtali. So we talked yesterday about the Hula Valley. We talked about Kiryat Shmona. But if you take a look at this, these mountains and the mountains that we're standing on, this we talked about at some point in the history of the world, however you gonna figure that, right? Again, Hula Valley, these mountains and these mountains seem to have been connected up at some point. Why? Because they had the very similar geological formations. Why is that important to us? Because this is so much fun. Why is it important? Because if we're down the Hula and we see the white-capped mountains of the Hermon and we get drawn to that and we go on up the mountains, all of a sudden what we're going to find is like there's a lot of vineyards that have been planted up there in the Golan. And we're going about 20 years, maybe a little bit more, 20 years back. Let's start like this. I think this would be fair to say, if we were on the bus, you could shout it out. But if I go back to my childhood, what I remember was either getting Kedem wine or Manischewitz. Does that ring a bell? I remember Manischewitz on Passover. Yeah, for Manischewitz, the heavy, extra heavy Malaga, you had to come with a fork and a knife to drink that wine. That sounds familiar. So that was going back then. And if you got wine that came in from Israel, it was only one, Carmel, the Carmel winery. All of a sudden, and they were good, okay, but all of a sudden about 20 plus years ago, they started planting vineyards up here on the Golan Heights. And boom, we finally got, this is the Golan Winery. Some people might come here on visits. Golan Winery, Golan Heights Winery. All of a sudden, and these are the labels, I'm pretty sure most of these are being sold in America. You can get hold of these. These are 4 different labels that go with the Golan Heights Winery. They're the little Talmudic period olive lamp is their symbol. These are different labels that you have. And they have a lot of medal winners in international competitions, which is pretty amazing in the short span that they've been in business. What happened all of a sudden? So if you remember this, up on the Golan Heights, we're close to where there's snow. It's colder, it's a cold area, but what's most important is that the heights themselves are really why they're called heights. There are mountains, they're plateau, volcanic plateau. I think yesterday we might have seen when we were looking towards the eastern border of Israel, I had mentioned it, you can see the bumps on the eastern horizon. Those are volcanoes. That I mentioned is the natural defense that we have, because it's going to force enemy tanks to have to go in between those volcanic mountains. So this whole plateau, the Golan Heights, and also the heights of Naphtali, they're all volcanic plateaus. You have all that rich minerals in the ground and the cold temperature. It's wonderful for producing fantastic wines. And there've been all of a sudden a change in the wine industry in Israel, exporting medal winners. And you'll find now, I think on the shelves, you could also find right over here on the hills of Naphtali, a little bit north of Tzfat, where we were yesterday, you'll find wineries like Dalton, D-A-L-T-O-N, Dalton wineries are also producing. A lot of these boutique wineries all over Israel. It's interesting to see how the industry is developing constantly. If you head back, and it's going to bring us back to a moment in history, we talked about yesterday, and this is why you see that there's certain periods of time that you're going to land at different places in Israel. It's all going back to the same periods of time. So remember yesterday, we were up in the Hula Valley, right around over here. We were talking about that in the early 1900s. We were trying to buy lands in this country. We were buying basically marshlands and sandy areas, barren areas, because that's what was being offered for us to buy. So that goes back even a little bit further. If you go back 40 years before that, you're going to have right along the coast, we were able to obtain some land, again, because that's what was being sold to us. So we came back to the country and boom, we started out, let's say in the 1880s, in a place that looked a little bit like this. What exactly are we looking at? This is the main drag in Zichron Yaakov. Zichron Yaakov, which is found in the coastal plain, right about over here. Zichron Yaakov, I don't know where this picture is dated, but things, you can still come back today. This is called Rehov HaMiyazdim, the Founders Street. And these houses, albeit they've been fixed up, but they're still there. And this is another one of those, I should have bought 20 years ago. It's closed off. It's a pedestrian walk. It's the middle of the country, middle of the city. And and things have gone up. Why am I showing you this? Because Zichron Yaakov, it's a period in our history in the early 1880s. It's called the first Aliyah. When you had first a steady flow of people coming in from primarily Eastern Europe. They were coming to the country, knew nothing about farming. You can see how they're dressed. It's pretty European, nothing about farming. And they were trying to figure out what to do over here. And comes this guy and saves the day. Who is this fellow? Exactly. Baron Rothschild. This is Baron Edmund Rothschild. In this country, this part, it goes back into the Rothschild family history. It's great to look it up, but you're talking about in the late 1800s, the Rothschild banking family is one of the wealthiest families in the world. Put him together, or his father together with Montefiore. You got some of the wealthiest people in the world, and they're concerned. They're concerned about the Jewish people. Baron Rothschild in this country, if you go over to somebody and you say, who is Hanadiv Hayadua, the great benefactor? You say, like this, anybody on the street, who's the great benefactor? Everyone will know it's Baron Rothschild, which is pretty amazing. If that's your epitaph, the great benefactor, and that's a pretty nice thing to be said about him. Why did he become the great benefactor? Because he was involved. This is actually what he started in that town, Zichron Yaakov, to give people ability to earn some money, to have parnasa. This is the beginnings of the Carmel Wine Factory. And the Carmel wineries that we grew up with, actually their beginnings is 1882 down here in Zichron Yaakov. And it wasn't just that he was giving what means of production to the fledgling, not even state, the fledgling settlements here in Israel. He also bankrolled many of them and many of the people. Bottom line, Baron Edmund Rothschild bankrolled 54 settlements at that period of time, from 1880s to the early 1900s. I mean, we wouldn't have this country if it wouldn't have been for him. And I sometimes ask my birthrights, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do with it? And you could come up with some good ideas. And Baron Rothschild actually floated the country at the very beginning. And that's why Carmel Winery was the one that we knew, because it's been around since 1882. This is still one of the original storage houses for the barrels of wines. This is their emblem that they have, a reference to the spies, from the Israelite spies who grabbed some of the fruits of Israel and marched it back into the wilderness to show how productive the country was. And that's a great story about Carmel Winery. So we really have moved on since the Carmel Winery. Golan was the first ones, and since then there's boutique wineries all over the place. I remember I used to teach in a school outside of Jerusalem. On the way in, it was like we were going through a forest. It was towards a place called Beit Meir. You have to go through a pine forest. I hadn't been there. I left that place. And I came back about 20 years later, and instead of pine forest, everything had been. You had like vineyards all along the way. So everywhere you turn nowadays, there's new vineyards being produced. Tishbe is also from that area of Zichron Yaakov with their own story. And I think everyone recognizes this landscape. This is going to bring us back to the first day of our trip. You see something that's barren and arid. I know that I'm down south. I'm in the Negev. What's amazing, again, what we studied was that on the first day we mentioned David Ben Gurion, and it's the Negev that's going to show the creativity and the pioneering vigor of Israel. And we saw a lot of what's going on as far as making the desert bloom. But what we also, and these are the sites that we saw, I think we have to, might have to mute, and I'll unmute myself again. Yeah. Oh, I could. Excellent. So if you look at these, we know these sites. We were there on our second day when we went down to the Gaza envelope. Remember this thing? Like, this is what it looked like when people came out of Oz and they started to settle down here. We went to visit JNF Chalutza, and in the midst of these sand is this couple, Alon and Nira Tzadok. Alon and Nira Tzadok are living down in a place called Kadesh Barnea, which is the same site that we went to on our very first stop on the trip. When we went off the beaten path to see Mount Karkom, which is possibly the mountain of Sinai. Well, the way to get into the desert is from there where they live, which is called Kadesh Barnea. And they, out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, went and started planting vineyards. Unreal. The contrast between the area that's green and the vineyards and everything else, the way it looks. But they were able to do so. And what they came up with is today, it's called Ramat Negev Winery. This is what I mentioned the other day. It's one of my favorite bottles of Southern Port. What's interesting about their winery is that they talk about the fact that it's really so ecologically friendly. They use water that they drill from under the ground. The water's a little bit saline, brackish. They remove the saline water and they use that in their winery. They don't have any pesticides, not needed. Nobody lives down in the desert, not even the bugs. So they don't need pesticides. The dryness of the desert, also certain fungus will not grow there, which enables them to have everything organic. And the land itself, they prune whenever they prune the land, the vineyards, they just let it sit there, and that's like organic materials. No destruction, because in the desert, no destruction of any natural habitats. Really amazing place. So this is a bottle. I love the Southern Port. There's one of the JNF administrators I was talking to, directors from the New York area, a guy named Mike. We were talking, and I said about port. He said he loves port wines. So I told him about it. He was trying to find it. The thing about this country in Israel is really cool. I called up when Mike couldn't find the Southern Port. I called up the winery. Guy answers the phone. I said, I'm trying to check this out. Who is this I'm speaking to? He says, this is Alon. I said, yeah, Alon, the guy who runs the place. Everyone's very accessible in this country. People are very chilled. He had said that this year they didn't ship to America because something with the dollar exchange rate. But anyway, if you see this Southern Port floating by, grab hold of it. It's on my high list. But that's amazing. From the north, near the Hermon Mountain, down to the very south of the country, you're going to find that the wine industry is just booming over here in Israel. It's sort of like going back to our basics. Biblical times, we are known for wine, grain, and olive oil. And you're finding that over here in Israel today. Today, the Israel wine map has numerous different areas. And that's because of the amazing reestablishment of the wine industry in our country, in our young country. And it's just developing further and just producing internationally acclaimed wines. Something nice about the country. And with that having been said, as we leave the Golan, I just want to show you one more thing that I was asked to talk about, which is in the Golan Heights, Dafka, specifically, and it's called the Chargol Food Technology. Now, I definitely, I purposely used a picture. I heard somebody said that they're eating supper while they're watching this, while they're watching the tour. So this is pretty nondescript, which is good. I don't want to get anybody feeling queasy, because what we're actually looking at, and this is what the Hargal Food Tech does. We talk about startups in Israel. Well, this startup is into delivering protein. What does it say here in the small print? Grasshopper protein powder. Yeah, they have a startup in which their claim, and it's interesting, is that the proteins that you get off of grasshoppers is going to far surpass anything that you're going to get off of meat. And they have here, you could go on their site, and I put some of it here in the protein content and the nutrients, etc., as sustainability. And they're very much pushing this as a startup in Israel. For us, we don't eat grasshoppers in Western world, but throughout the rest of the world, people are eating grasshoppers. Like in Africa, they eat grasshoppers, and their feeling is that they could be helpful in the fact that it's rather inexpensive for them to supply their protein, and they might be helpful in helping out the world be able to meet the demands.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, anyway.
Excuse
if
me
you go
one
online-
second.
Sure.
Baruch, I just wanted
Yes.
to add,
Yes.
as you're showing this, because this is very appropriate, are you going to tell about how that they're using it for feed, the grasshoppers?
For feed also? No, go ahead. I'm not.
Okay, so what's happening is, as they're looking into mass production, and they've been using it in small organic farms right now for chicken feed and for other, even to the point of being able to operate with large animals, so that it's more efficient. And it will also, what you have now on the screen will help with reducing the gas emissions, reducing the water waste, because of the ability in a small concentrated area to produce these grasshoppers.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so
I can also interject that I've heard the founder of Hargal Industries talk about, he's adorable, he's a young man, and he's obviously a startup and an entrepreneur. But they use this protein powder to make protein bars out of grasshopper. They literally grind the grasshoppers up and make protein bars out of them, which you can buy. If you go on this website, Hargal Industries, they have them, and I have tried them, and they're okay. And then my next answer question for the rabbi, or if anyone in your show wants to know, they are not yet kosher certified, but Rabbi, you can maybe make a comment on that. But it is believed that grasshoppers are not treif, that they are an acceptable animal to eat. So they're hoping to be certified at some point, and they're up and growing business. So if you want to go on the website and look, you can have some imported, and Sharona has talked about some of the other wonderful uses they have for the protein powder as well.
All right. They have on their site, they do to mention that there's an old Yemenite Jews eat a certain type of grasshopper. It's called a chagav. And they and this company are using the grasshoppers that, based upon a Yemenite tradition, would be kosher. We've lost that tradition. So that's what puts the spin on whether or not it's kosher or not. And we'll see how things develop. Okay. So interesting. I spared you some of the pictures. There's a picture of this young person, Kim, that you just mentioned, the founder. And if you just put him into Google, the guy's there munching on a huge grasshopper. I said, I'm out of here. That's enough for me. So we spared you on some of the pictures. Here we go. We're back in our hotel rooms. We have to get down to the bus. And we were looking out from our hotel rooms down towards Haifa Bay and towards the Baha'i Gardens. Now, these Baha'i Gardens, you could see, if you go down below and you look upwards, it's just amazing, the amount of work. Why are they so involved in the gardening work? And what exactly is this? They call this the Shrine of the Bab. So this is the Baha'i religion. This is in Haifa. And just a little bit of background on it very quickly is the word Bab means like the gate. And we even in Aramaic, Baba means a gate. Like in the Talmud, we have a couple of tractates called Baba Kama, Baba Metzia. That means a gate. So the fellow who's born, this guy, fellow is Ali Muhammad. He's going back to the early 1800s in Iran. And he proclaims himself as a prophet, as a herald, though, to somebody who's going to come in the future who's even greater than him. At the age of 24, he announces that he's a prophet. That's in 1843. He's into, like, he talks about at that time, he's really a person who was ahead of his times. He forbade violence and jihad. He talks about equality for women, encourages science, study of science and education, very much into social action, unity. They claim to be a monotheistic religion. So that's the beginning of the Baha'i religion, this fellow named Bob. Because of the fact he's attracting a lot of followers, the clergy in Iran are threatened by him. Eventually, he actually is executed. For about 50 years, they didn't allow his body to be moved, but eventually his followers, 50 years later, were able to remove the body from Iran, bring it over to here to Haifa, and that's what you're looking at. This is called the Shrine of the Bab. That's where he is buried. And the idea of this beautiful, beautiful greenery around it is that the shrine and the garden are supposed to be an answer to the fellow's suffering and injustices that were done to him. Now, once he's getting followers, amongst his followers was a fellow named Hussein Ali, 1817 to 1892. His name, what he's called is the Baha'u'llah. In other words, Baha's glory, and Ullah, like the word Allah, like the word Hebrew, in Hebrew El, is glory of God. That's his name. He becomes a follower, but eventually he comes from nobility. They don't execute him, but they do send him into exile. And again, this is the beautiful Baha'i Gardens, but we're going to be going off the beaten path, because if you get on the bus, and now we're on the bus and we're traveling, we're actually going to go traveling all the way over from Haifa up to Acco. Get to Acco, there's again another one of these Baha'i Gardens, not as popular, not as known about, not as extravagant, but this is from the beginnings of the Baha'i religion. And this is actually what we're looking at over here, is the shrine of the Baha'u'llah. This is where he's buried, because he was sent into exile first in Iran and in different places within Iran, Baghdad, eventually Istanbul. And at some point in 1868, he comes to Acco. First 9 years, he's in prison. Basically, the Turkish government, they didn't kill him, but they wanted to get him out of the way because he's, it's threatening to the government. They put him into Acco. Acco is like in those times, we're talking about in Israel. This, again, is somewhat easy to remember. We go back, independence, 1948, go back 30 years. That's going to be the British Mandate period, and then go back 400 years. It's all round numbers. That's going to be the beginning of the Ottoman Turkish Muslim Empire. So from 1517 to 1917. So during that period, the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Turkish Empire, is controlling the world. At this point, mid-1800s, Israel's a backwater. I mean, you got something going on in Haifa, a little Acco. Acco has the old city, as we're going to see shortly. Jerusalem's a backwater, and not much going on in this part of the world. So if you put your enemies down in this part of the world, basically you've taken care of getting them out of the way. So that's where the Baha'u'llah shows up, and he's allowed, after being in prison for his last 12 years of his life, he's able to live in Acco, in a mansion of some sort, in a house of some sort. And that's where he's a prolific writer, and that's where he gets out some of his books. He's buried, and this is where he's buried. And that's why this also is a very important spot, a religious spot for the Baha'i religion. The Baha'u'llah writes, before he died, he wrote that they should not, that the Baha'i should not be teaching their teachings in Israel. He said, like, they don't proselytize, but not to teach in Israel. So for the most part, these areas, both in Haifa and Acco, are run by the religion. And you have a school over here, and you have followers from all over the world that come, but it's pretty self-contained. And this is some of the beauty, again, the greenery and the shrines. Here's the main promenade down towards the house at the end of the row. And this is the shrine of the Baha'u'llah. And that's something that's, again, not visited so often, but you should know it's out there. Just beautiful, beautiful as the other one. Gardens that you have over there. In Acco, once we're in Acco, let's take a look at Acco. All right. Again, we're still at the shrine in Acco, and it's a little bit quieter. Something to go visit. Okay, what we're going to see is Acco. Here's the old Acco. You can see how Acco, it's a natural port. It juts out a little bit into the Mediterranean, and you have these ancient Ottoman walls that go around it. This is the old city of Acco. Acco is it goes back thousands of years. What's important for us, and let's just take a look at this, it's just music in the background, but it's a quick view of Acco. It's a port city. You have the natural ports, the breakers, the fisheries. There you go, out there. A lot of arts and crafts that you find nowadays. And then there's an underground city that we're going to be talking about in a moment. It goes back to the Crusader times. Okay, and that's Acco. There's a lot going on. And what we're going to take a look at is we're back here in the old city of Acco. Acco goes back, again, like I mentioned, thousands of years, but when it's first is important is for what we're going to be viewing is going back to the Crusader period. So the Crusaders, it's about a span of about 200 years. You have the first and second Crusader kingdom. The first one starting in 1099 is going to go all the way up to 1187. It's easy to remember because the Crusaders lost the battle to the famous Salah ad-Din on July 4th of 1187. They come back a short time afterwards and they have a second kingdom, which is not as strong, also for about 100 years. But their main base is always going to be Acco. It's a port that exists and they establish it. At some point, they hit a city of 25,000. And the Crusaders left over a lot. It became at some point underground just because of the passage of time and the destruction of a lot of the buildings on top of them. But this is what we see underground. If we do go underground, you have the leftovers, remnants from the great Crusader fortresses. There was different Crusader orders of knights. Crusaders, for the most part, were different orders, knights who were both religious, but also, and a lot of times they had specific also social like concerned about hospitallers, for example, were concerned about ill people or taking care of pilgrims who were coming to the Holy Land. This is built by the Knights of Order of St. John's, the Hospitallers, and it remained underground till it was excavated. Just tremendous construction. They also, at the same time, this goes back to the 1200s, they built an escape tunnel from their Crusader castle, an escape tunnel that goes for about 350 meters that has been dug up. It was only found in 1994. Why? Because some fellow in his house had a clogged drain, so he was digging down to see why it's clogged and landed up inside this escape tunnel. It goes from the Crusader castle out to the port area that we saw. And this also is a site that we're able to walk through when we're visiting in Acco. What they've done nowadays, the municipality has made a museum of Acco, which goes through different periods of times. Excellently done. Here, as you can see, this is like a medieval dress, and it gives you the history of the times. It's done very nicely, as far as the periods, the European period found in the country in the middle of the Middle East. And of course, it has the usual, you can find, buy your trinkets when you're over there. Menachem Begin, right? I think Menachem Begin is a pretty well-recognized Israeli statesman of past. What does Menachem Begin have to do with Acco? So Menachem Begin, if you know, I'm going to just take us back in time. Again, everywhere you land in Israel is going to bring you back to some period of history. It's always, it makes fascinating, traveling around the country. But you got to keep connected in. Menachem Begin, as we know, was the prime minister from 1978 and onwards for a good number of years. Menachem Begin was the head of the Irgun. What was the Irgun? The Irgun was, let's go back further. When it came time, the British were here in the country for 30 years. They had a mandate from the League of Nations to run Israel. And at some point, there was a push, not some point, for a long time, there was a push, primarily what was called the Jewish Agency. Jewish Agency was like representative of the Jewish settlement, and was recognized by the British government as being a representative of what was going on in the Jewish settlements here in Israel. The Jewish Agency and their military branch, the Haganah, was involved in trying to come up with a political situation, political Zionism, in order to convince the world and the British Empire to give over independence to the Jewish settlements. Menachem Begin's Irgun was felt that it was more so that one had to take a military action against the British government, and feeling that because it was an army that was present, not against civilians, which is categorized as terrorism, but against the British government and or the army, and that was called the Irgun. During the World War II, it was kind of like quiet. People, the Haganah and the Irgun, sort of came to understanding and work with the British against the Nazis. But once 1945 came around, then there was this little bit of a splitting of the ways. The Irgun said, look, we lost a lot of people in the Holocaust because the British had a ban on immigration into Israel. Now, after the Holocaust, you have all these Jews are stuck in displaced person camps. They have no place to go. You have to open the borders. And when the British didn't do so, they started becoming very militaristic against the British in Palestine at the time. One of the men in the Irgun was a fellow named Dov Gruner. Dov Gruner was a Hungarian Jew, got to Israel. He was smuggled out from Nazi Europe, and he got to Israel in 1940. 1941, he joins the British Army. For the next 4 years, he serves along with the British Army, and then afterwards, he was with the Irgun. And he was caught, along with many others, and this is a point in history, that in this same, the Crusader fortress that we saw, eventually on the ruins of the Crusader fortress was built by the Ottoman Turks, their own citadel and prison and government buildings, which when the British came in 1917, they took that over, made it into a prison as well. And in this prison is where many of the soldiers, I guess, of the Irgun who were caught by the British were imprisoned. And here we're taking a look. And now this is, you could visit this also when you come to Acco. And here's a picture from the 1940s of the Irgun members and others. There was also Haganah and members there in Lehi. And they were just, they're out for a stroll in the afternoon. And unfortunately, I don't like to stay on this picture so much, but this is a picture of the gallows. I remember when I was in Israel at the time, in my gap year, I remember coming back from my gap year program, and I had a picture of the gallows, and I basically at some point threw it out. I wasn't sure if I should include it tonight. I sort of came up with a difference. I was talking to my daughter between when educating about what's happened at the Acco prison to include the picture. For my own self, but as far as what I remember from my gap year in Israel, I don't own that picture anymore. Very sad picture. The gallows, the British used the gallows, and here's a picture of Dov Gruner, and there's another 12 who were actually hung back then in that time period in Acco prison. Eventually, about 2 weeks after Dov Gruner was hung, they claimed, the Irgun was claiming that because they felt there was a battle, it was a freedom fight against an army, that they should be considered to be prisoners of war. And but 2 weeks after Dov Gruner and 3 others were hung, the Irgun were successful in blowing up holes in the side of the prison. And it's a complex operation that they were able to do, the Irgun, but they were successful in freeing a number of captives from the prison. This scene, this whole escapade, I think is presented in the movie, that old movie Exodus. Remember Exodus with Paul Newman? And they talk about this break-in or breakout, and it was such a mess. This probably also had a lot to do with the UN finally establishing their committee, their special committee on Palestine, which in about half a year later will eventually bring about the suggestion for a partition plan. In other words, to end the British mandate and split the country between a Jewish state and an Arab state. And when you see the pictures of, like sometimes you hear about the establishment of the state, so they have the UN voting. I can't do it without holding my nose. It goes, Uganda, yes, Argentina, no. Yeah, they have this whole thing, and then everyone's dancing in the streets in circles. That's not Independence Day. That actually is the day that the partition plan for Palestine was passed in the UN. And that's this period of time that you land into when you come to visit in Acco, this prison. So it's, again, interesting what you have over there. This is going to bring us heavily into what's this fellow? Who's this guy exactly? This fellow's named Jazer Pasha. So, or the fellow's name is actually Ahmad Pasha Jazar. Why is he up here? Well, he's going to be smack in the middle of the Ottoman period, 400 years in this country, smack in the middle of the 1800s. And what is the name? What does Jazar mean? That's his name, Jazar. Jazar means butcher. He was a proficient butcher, meaning that he was really, he was put into power by the government in Istanbul, the Ottomans, but he did a great job of keeping a lid on things going on in this area in Palestine and in Syria, but he was a butcher. He actually had a Jewish accountant, a fellow named Chaim Parsi from Damascus, who was excellent and very loyal and did a great job, but this butcher, actually I think cut off a piece of either the ear or the nose of his accountant just to teach him that he has to always remain obedient. That's what we're talking about over here. What does he have to do with this person? Can you identify? At home, you should answer, and then if somebody else is sitting with you, you could take, you see who gets the most points, but this is obviously Napoleon Bonaparte. What does he have to do with this fellow, with Pasha Jazar? Because with Napoleon actually enters into the area in the 1800s, and he comes in from Egypt, comes up the coast, and he actually puts a siege on Acco at the time. And those are the walls that we saw around the city were strong walls, held off Napoleon for months. This fellow, Ahmad Jazar, or Jazar Pasha, he actually got help from the British. British frigates came in, and they're right off the Acco coast, and they were shooting against the troops of Napoleon, forced Napoleon back, and Napoleon eventually had to leave Palestine, go back into Egypt, and there both the Ottoman Turks and the British together pushed French back out of the Middle East, or out of northern Egypt. So this Pasha, this is in the 1800 exactly, and at that point, right afterwards, he builds this mosque. This mosque is either called the White Mosque, or it's known as the El Jazar Mosque, El Jazar Pasha Mosque. Outside of Jerusalem, this is the largest mosque you're going to find in Israel. We actually, on our tour guiding course, went in here. Beautiful mosque, large, and this is built by this fellow. He got it done in a single year, and it was the guy who had things done. This is part of Acco. What's nice, let's do a positive spin. This is a large mosque. It is used because Acco has a large Arab population and a large Jewish population. Acco is one of those cities where you have coexistence taking place. You never hear about like riots or things. It's really a city that successfully Arabs and Jews are coexisting, and we hope that should continue to be found throughout the country. And here's an example of this huge mosque that we find inside Acco, in Acco. This over here is really off the beaten path, in that before we leave Acco, I just wanted to take a look. It's a small little synagogue, and right next to the walls that if you leave the old city, you'll be at the shorefront. This is known as the Ramchal Synagogue. Who's the Ramchal? Ramchal is an acronym for Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, early 1700s, is a philosopher, a Kabbalist. We have a lot of his works. They're works on ethics, such as Paths of the Just, The Way of God. They're works that are still studied until today. And then he has some deeper Kabbalistic works, which are not as known. And he actually, his last 3 years, he does come from Italy, and he makes it to Acco, and that's where he lives. He dies very young. There was a synagogue, a shul that was his. it seems that that shul was taken in the mid 1700s by the Muslim ruler, and instead they gave the Jews back a smaller shul, and that's what you're looking at. It was named after the Ramchal. Yes.
One quick thing,
Rabbi.
just you're mentioning the Ramchal. So for those of you who have studied Musar with me, Baruch just mentioned one of his books, but the Ramchal is one of the important Musarniks, one of his books is really one of the real standards of that whole Musar movement. Thanks.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Yes, and that one, I guess the Rabbi, you're probably referring to the Pathways of the Just. Is that Mesilat Yesharim? That's the Rabbi. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so the Ramchal is a known entity still after 300 years and 250 years. So this is he didn't pray here, but they immediately in the mid 1700s, because he left such an impression on the place. He was such a great Jewish philosopher and ethicist that we still today we study his writing. So they called this after him. So that's what you find in Acco. Here you come to Acco, who would know? Jerusalem, we have their synagogues, but who would think that there's that kind of an ancient synagogue also here in Acco, and it's all there. If you want to talk about not so ancient a synagogue, let's move over to this one. Just give you a little bit of the pictures and we'll talk about it. This is called the Tunisian synagogue. Okay, and let's.
One last thing. Sure. So when you don't tell us the important stuff while the video is going, because we can't hear you when you do that.
Oh, okay. Oh, it shuts off my sound?
No, it's just we can't hear it over the sound usually.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I didn't know. Okay, good to hear. Thank you very much, Rabbi. So here we go. Take a look at this one. It's beautiful. I want you to take a look. It's a synagogue, and it's the only one in the world. Inside, outside, it's all mosaics. Here, you could be in the festival. This institution, this synagogue, it's also known or Torah as the Light of Torah Synagogue or the Jerba Synagogue. Why? Jerba, Tunisia. This is a Tunisian synagogue. And in Jerba, the idea of having the synagogue mosaics all over, you don't find a single wall that's not covered by a mosaic. This has been 54 years in the making. And the person who's been pushing this whole project all along is the fellow standing in front of you right now, Tzion Badash. Millions of mosaic pieces that have gone into place. Where does this idea come up from? Here we got the old Beit Knesset, the old synagogue in Jerba itself. And you can see it's the same kind of motif of having a lot of mosaics. So they've been working on this for all this time. Here you can see on the outside of the synagogue also mosaics pieces that are found. You go on in, main sanctuary, look at that. Everywhere you turn, both the floors, the ceilings, you can see on the walls themselves, here are the Aron Kodesh. It's all covered over with mosaics. And if you look up, you can see also in the dome that you find in this, you'll have in the middle here, we're going around, this is going to be the horoscope. In other words, the signs, the zodiac, not the horoscope, the zodiac. You have the calendar. You have over along this part of the dome, you're going to see the different tribes of Israel. And the themes, you have 4 floors in this synagogue. These themes are based upon the Bible, history of the Jewish people, Zionism. That's what you can find throughout the building. Here's the study hall, same idea. On the top of the study hall, you might have seen in the film, they actually have the temple, the layout of the temple from Jerusalem. Really a tremendous place to visit. Here you're looking at the side of the study hall. You actually have the old city walls of Jerusalem. And in the main sanctuary, what buildings? Some of the motifs are the buildings. What buildings do we see? This one, if you could guess it, give yourself points at home. This is going to be Kever Rachel, the place where Rachel is, Mother Rachel is buried outside in Beit Lechem. This one over here, you could see, is going to be Marat HaMachpelah, the cave of the matriarchs and the patriarchs down in Hebron. What else? This is thematic. Who's this supposed to be? And we have a woman who seems to be holding on to a scepter of kingship. Who's that going to be? Coming up soon to a Jewish community near you. The holiday of Purim, Esther Amalka. So Queen Esther. And that's what we have down in that Tunisian synagogue. Wonderful place to visit. Before we leave Acco, there's another thing going on. And this is a JNF major enterprise, which is something else that's very beautiful. In the middle of Acco, they do have a tourist information center, but even more importantly is that they have here with the JNF supported what's called the Western Galilee Now. What is Western Galilee now? Unfortunately, because so much of the commerce of the Western Galilee is based upon tourism. I mean, for the longest time, since March for sure, and just anyway, you always need a boost. It's been a little bit tougher. So the Western Galilee Now is a consortium of about 60 small businesses that it's mostly family-oriented, small businesses, and the Western Galilee Now organization attempts to bring tourist business up into the Western Galilee. They run excursions and events and concerts and tours, all kinds of things to have people coming up north. This is their shop that you could come to visit. So we're just going to take a quick run through a couple of the things that they're doing over there. And so, for example, we are here in Acco, and right up here along the Lebanese border, there's a little town that's called Shtula. And here's a cute little thing, just very short. Shula from Shtula.
Hello, I'm Shula from Shtula. Welcome to my home.
One of the examples of in-gathering of the exiles, that you could go anywhere. You have so many different types of culinary treats based upon the backgrounds of the people who are cooking. So that's an example of some place. It's a small place, right? Shula has her small little business there, which she has home hospitality and cooks. And she needs a little bit of help trying to get people up there, especially nowadays. We're going to next head over right north of Acco, and we're coming to a place called, everyone loves chocolate, Odette handmade chocolate. This is this is only put together in 3 years ago, 2017. Dr. Shlomit Zamir. When I was trying to find the chocolatier, I kept coming up with Shlomit Zamir. It says she's in research and development in Israel Defense. Yeah, this woman goes back to the Technion, which is a top technical school here in Israel. I mean, she's got a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with chocolates. I said, is this the one who's the chocolatier? And yeah, she had a hobby. Hobby is chocolate. She named Odette is after her mom. She actually wanted to also, besides the hobby, wanted to come up with a workspace that would be fitting for her sister, who is let's say, on mental health, is challenged in a mental health fashion. And so she came up with this chocolate in Regba. It's right north of Acco. It's becoming very popular in the short time it's been around. That looks interesting. I'd rather eat that than grasshoppers. So here we go. We're going to take another jump over, right over into the middle of the Western Galilee. This is the upper Western Galilee. And now we find ourselves in a beautiful, again, small places that are being helped by the Western Galilee Now Foundation, which is funded by the JNF. This one, though, so beautiful. You see why? This is called in the kibbutz Kishore. This is called Kishore Vineyards. And again, another example of a new winery. And whereas I know about Carmel, and then I remember Golan wineries, and like where else? Golan wineries, you got all those minerals in the ground from the volcanoes. How can you have another place? And it seems like everywhere in Israel, they're just coming up with wineries. What's so special about Kinora wineries? So here, this is what's special. Because you have, Kishore winery. So you have Kishore as the winery, and then right next to it, you have Kishorit Village. Kishorit Village is as you can see in the writing over here, for people with special needs, live right next to the Kishore kibbutz. And the kibbutz gives work opportunities to those who are living in Kishorit, the people with special needs. So beautiful, just so beautiful, like this idea of a whole community that's involved in helping another community out. And here it says like vegetable gardens, bakery, goats, milk shop, garden, winery. And that gives the opportunity for these people, these challenged adults to be able to have a way of making a living. And I thought that's just such a beautiful, something special. So it's not only just to support these enterprises, but a lot of them are very much involved in really positive social action. And that's going to bring us to the last of the small enterprises, which has a great message as well. That's going to bring us all the way up to Kibbutz Sasa, which is also on the border with Lebanon. And this is a place you could take a look on the sign. It says Buja Pashut Glida, simply ice cream. Buja is Arabic for ice cream. Arabic word written in Hebrew. Where exactly are we? This is the people who founded Buja Ice Cream. We meet on your left is going to be Adam Ziv from the Kibbutz Sasa, and on your right is Allah Swaitat from the town of Tarshiha, an Arab town which is right next to the Kibbutz Sasa. So the story is that this fellow Adam always liked ice cream. He says as a kibbutznik, when he was a little kid, he got taken to on a summer tour with the kibbutznikim, and he got to an amusement park, and he said they're going to give out ice cream. He didn't even know what ice cream was. And then he fell in love. And he said from then on, when he got out of the army, he decided to travel all around the world. He was in Europe for a while. He played music during the day to get some money, and then he'd check out as he traveled all the different ice cream parlors. He finally wound up in the Canary Islands, where he was working half a day and learning the art of making ice cream. He got back to his kibbutz, and here Allah was running a Aluma restaurant. The two got together and they said, let's do a joint enterprise, Arab, Jewish, Israeli enterprise, and ice cream, because everybody loves ice cream, and everybody's gonna meet, everybody will come and meet with ice cream. They call it coexistence in a cone. And they started off not that long ago, high quality from scratch, raw materials, less sugar, so you can really taste the materials involved. They have certain crazy stuff, such as flavored called grapefruit arak. Arak being arak is arak, licorice tasting liquor. And they try to take from Israel dates from the Arava, and you have pecans from Kibbutz Sasa. You have almonds from Al Faham, which is an Arab town in Israel next to Haifa. And that's what they have now. They created a factory and a visitor center you can come to see. They're already branching out. This is the Buja store in Tel Aviv. They have five branches by now. And what they have had is they won in 2017 the UN Peace Prize called the Flourish Prize. The write-up on it was kind of cute because the person said it's like a cold peace, you get it? But they run that Peace Prize. And as he says, this fellow Adam Ziv, He felt that ice cream parlors is a natural meeting grounds. It's true. Parents come in with the kids and everyone's sitting around with the ice cream and the little kids start to play together. And it really is a natural meeting grounds. And he says, this is a quote from this fellow, Adam Zeev. He says, in order to light up the darkness, one must turn on the flashlight. The light we are creating with Bougia is probably dim, but it's a light nonetheless, which is a very nice attitude. It's a start. Like he's not deluding himself, but you do a little bit. Everyone does a little bit of peacemaking in their own little neck of the woods, and you find that light grows and grows until it's really large. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to travel down. Everyone could, just take a relax on the bus. We're going to go all the way down from Acco, 2 hours, and we're going to finally come to Jerusalem. That's where we're staying tonight. Why? Because number one, I would like to sleep in the King David as well. So you're my ticket in, and we're going to be at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, the premier hotel in Israel, or one of the premier hotels. It's been around, and dignitaries from all over the world, when they come to Jerusalem, they come to Israel, are going to be staying in the King David. But what's really great about the King David is that, and all of its European fare, is that you look out the window over here. What do you see? Well, first you have to get past the beautiful pool, but when you look out the window, what do you see? None other than the old city walls of Jerusalem, which is a great place to spend the night and to be staring out at. And hopefully, right behind those walls, you get to a place known as the Kotel, where this is taken from one of those times, and it happens often that the Kotel Plaza actually fills up. This holds 50,000 people. I've been there in times when from all, Jewish ethnicities, from all backgrounds, everyone's just like piling into the Kotel as a symbol of unity within the Jewish people. And it's really a blast. You can have times, especially it's called Siyarei Slichot, right between the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that it became sort of like a thing in this country, is that late night, it's 12 o'clock at night, you got all over the place in the old city of Jerusalem. You have like people are on tours, even little kids, it's 12 o'clock at night, they're up, and eventually at 12, it's just so everyone comes down to the Kotel, and they have the pre-Rosh Hashanah and pre-Yom Kippur prayers together. It's something quite special. Look, at this point, we'll have to call it quits. We had a big day and we're tired. At this point, we're unfortunately going to have to call it quits because that's the end of our fourth day. Unfortunately, I would like to thank all of you for just such an enjoyable time. Just being there for the 15 minutes before we start is, you could tell you just such a nice and lovely group. And Rabbi, you're fortunate to have such. I'm sure that part of you spreads out into the community as well, but it seems like you'd be a very special people. You are very special, and hopefully those borders will be open soon and we'll be able to actually hang out on a bus together and drive around the country.
Amen.
So thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you so much for all of your time and all of your expertise and really ushering us through the country at breakneck speed, which is I think the only positive of doing a virtual tour is that you can really cover a lot of ground. We never would have been able to see quite this much in 4 days, or 4 hours really total. We really thank you for all your time, and thanks for being with us.
I appreciate it.
All right.
So everyone, good health, happiness, and take care until the next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Shalom, 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 shalom.
Baruch, thank you so much. You were excellent. Thank you for giving your time so late at night, day after day, and for working with us to make this a speedy, fast mission and see such insightful places along the way. I think I speak for all 100+ people on a regular basis. Everyone loved where you took us, and hopefully everyone learned a few new things and enjoyed revisiting some sites they'd seen before. So
thank you.